Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, December 5th. So glad you could join me. Got a great critique coming up. As always, it's a chance to give that workshop experience. It's so valuable. So leave as many comments as you would in the chat windows, especially on YouTube. That's the main place where we live these days, but also on Facebook. You can leave comments there. I'll try to take a peek there as well. If you're on X, you're on your own, but at least it's out there. Let's see, who do we have in the house? So Phil Hall is here. Steve Horrell is here. He's got one in the queue. Elle of Arcadium is here. Patty Arbor. Brian O'Sullivan. Great to see you, Brian. Dick Westheimer, too. Another squad member. We got another poet here. Dee Coleman. Christina Nueven. Ryan. It's a little harder to read names now because they show your handle instead of your name. Kimberly Gibson Tran is here. Tom Barlow. Jamie Thomas. Sharon Ferrante. Cindy Guntherman. Katie H. Dozier over there in the room next door. We got, let's see, Mark Grenier is here. Katie Scuggs Galloway. Nina Avedon. All right, well, we got a great group of people. Mary Keating is here. Clayton Clark. Oh, thanks. Clayton says she enjoyed Did You See the Moon, Honey? Our new chapbook I did with Katie. It was National Poetry Month, but it just came out. A new episode of the Poetry Space just came out, too, talking about the chapbook and just chapbooks generally, and self-publishing. So check that out anywhere you find the Poetry Space on iTunes, Spotify, whatnot. Yeah. All right. And Jamie Thomas says, does anyone want to guess what channel unseated Taylor Swift is my most watched videos this year on YouTube? This year in review? I don't know. It'd be cool if it was us. That'd be fun. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so we're going to do that workshop like we always do. I already saw that Steve Horrell is here. We'll get to Steve's. Let's do Steve's. But we're going to start out with some older ones first. I want to make sure we get to Terry Miller, who's a good friend of the show. He's been on a lot. He does a lot of sharing, which is always really helpful. You know, if you tell your friends about it, if you share it on social media, it's nice. Terry shares a lot of our stuff on his social media platforms. Really appreciate that. He's here often for the critique of the week. Hasn't been lately. He's probably got something going on Friday afternoon. But he has a poem here from way back in March. I want to make sure it's the last day of March. I want to make sure we get to this because I'm going to have to, I think, just pass on some of these older poems so we catch up more. Because I started reminding people that they could submit, and now we have a flood of these submissions. So, and hang on, let me turn my phone to silent too. But we have too many. We have more come in right now than I can keep up with. So I'm going to have to flush some out, as it were. And but I want to make sure we get to Terry's first. So let's take a look at Terry's. And Terry's got a question for us, or at least a paragraph. Let's see. He says, I've been struggling with these two poems for several weeks now. So 2 bits may have a problem with on-ramping, and I actually might not need the stanzas 1, 2, and 8, but removing them poses a problem in creating a door slam at the end of the poem. So think about that. He says, suggestions or insights into how to better meld the introduction with the rest of the poem might be what I'm looking for. And then Pine Cones comes from watching my children collect pine cones. I think he's talking about the poem a little bit too much, so we'll skip that discussion, save that for later. But let's take a look at Terry's 2 poems. As always, though, leave as many comments as you would. We want to be helpful, and to be helpful is to have a whole audience, like we have, dozens and dozens of people watching this right now, leaving comments, letting people know how you're reacting to their poems. It's something that's really hard for poets to get, is actual feedback on how actual people actually feel about your poems. And the only way we can make more impact on our readers is by hearing what our readers are actually impacted by. And so leaving as many comments as you can really helps with that. So let's go through these 2 poems by Terry first. And we'll get to Steve's too in a little bit. Steve's definitely a friend of the show as well. Let's take a look at 2 bits first. And again, this is Terry Jude Miller right here, not too far away in Richmond, Texas. And we get an opportunity to see him around in a lot of local events too. So that's always nice. Okay, here's 2 bits. My silver hair is long and hirsute, and the barber shop is burning. Someone needed the insurance money, so I go unshorn. My grandfather used to slam our woolly sheep on a low-slung table. The ewes cried as though being slaughtered. There was no silence among the lambs. My paraplegic grandmother sat on a stool, snipped away the afternoon until sunset. 4th of July, we burned the pump shed down. Grandfather died. Sorry, I think I read that wrong. The 4th of July, we burned the pump shed down. Grandfather died. The sheep were sold. I remember them, plump with wool, loaded on a cattle trailer. They were sorrowfully loud, like my barber pretending his world has ended. Well, that's interesting. So I like the 2 Bits is an interesting title too. I like the way that these two stories are sort of braided together. Or can you have it braided with 2 strands? I guess not. But I like the movement that the comparison between the 2 things forces. But it does feel like there's not enough told about the barb. I think that's more the problem, is that on balance, there's more, more told about the ewes and the being slaughtered and the grandmother and the wool and stuff like that than there is about the insurance money in the which I'm not sure how to exactly take. I'm not sure if that's literal or my silver hair is long and how do I say that word? Maybe that might be a word I'm not pronouncing right. Hirsute. Let's see. And that just means hairy. So that's one of the things that I didn't know. And it's more like, it's hirsute. Okay. Or soot. I don't know. The problem is looking up pronunciations. I'm not exactly sure how to take the pronunciation symbols. Hirsute. Okay. But my silver hair is long and hirsute, and the barber shop is burning. So the fact that the barbershop, it's such a dramatic, I guess, thing to be happening. Someone's business place burning down. You wonder if it's like literally happening, or if there's something surreal entering in the poem. That's how I think of it. I didn't really think about, in writing. I guess part of the problem is writing a poem in the moment of the barbershop actually burning. It feels like very implausible, I guess. Like as the barbershop is burning down, I'm writing this poem. I think maybe that could be taken just by writing in the past tense. My silver hair is long and hirsute and the barbershop has burned down. And then also, though, someone needed the insurance money, so I go unshorn. I'm not sure how to take that either. So both 2 opening couplets leave me a little bit confused, even though not in the usual confusion where I don't know like who's who or what's what. I don't understand how accurate or how honest the narrator is being, because there's something a little odd about both of those. And then that sort of throws, and I think that's why the poem's not working. It sort of throws us off in a sort of weird direction. And then the poem goes into something very serious and not like that. So it's a little confusing to me, I think. So my first thought is let's expand on this and tell more of this story, because we're sort of left in the dark about it. My grandmother used to slam our woolly sheep on a low-slung table. So it's nice to have the story and then just be bold and transition to something completely different, a different time and place and topic, and then we can see how the 2 relate. It's sort of a cut like a haiku. And I think that's a really nice transition, as long as that beginning was fleshed out enough. The ewes cried as though being slaughtered. There was no silence among the lambs. So for this line, it's a callback to the film Silence of the Lambs. I think that cheapens the poem a little bit. I would not make it. It's too for how sort of deep and timeless the poem is trying to be. It's not a poem that has a lot of or any other pop references really. I guess you could call it maybe the 4th of July as a celebration, but most of it is not in that sort of voice that would sort of be cheekily referencing Silence of the Lambs. So I think that's a false way to go. I think I would describe the sound instead of making a reference like that, which is kind of a little quip, which doesn't fit with the tone of the rest of the poem. My paraplegic grandmother sat in a stool, snipped away the afternoon until sunset. See, so this whole story of I find that interesting. Personally, it's something I don't know much about, and it's something that it's told straightforward in a straightforward way that's compelling. I wouldn't mind seeing more detail about this too. The 4th of July, we burned the pump shed down. Grandfather died. The sheep were sold. So I'm wondering if now that I read, so today, is he saying that we burned down the shed for insurance money, and that's why he's sort of I don't know if joking is the right word, but the barber did that too. And I guess that's what's happening. The 4th of July, we burned the pump shed down. Grandfather died. The sheep were sold. Yeah. I remember them plump with wool, loaded on a cattle trailer. So I love these details, though. The simplicity of how these images are told, the directness and the honesty of it is really nice. They were sorrowfully loud, like my barber pretending his world has ended. So he doesn't trust the barber, thinking that that's the same way. Let me see what everybody else is saying. Those are my first interpretations. Yeah, so Clayton Clark says, I feel like the poem's missing feeling because though it has interesting images, it seems distant to me. Yeah, and D. Coleman says, the poem is trying too hard. Still, there's a good story and a good poem could come of it. Yeah. Yeah, and Brian Sullivan says, great ending. I love how the threads come together. So I just feel like, it's sort of like it's told in two, it's become too tight. And I wonder if, I think this is a poem where we should let it stretch out. And I'd suggest, looking at David Kirby's braids, we bring those up a lot, but it's a great way of going about storytelling. Look at his poem, More Than This on Rattle. I won't read them because they're pretty long. More Than This is a great one, weaving together a bunch of different stories. That other one, what's the one that's Katie's favorite? I can't remember. It's one of her favorite poems. Yeah, but I think both of these stories need more telling. I think it's become too sparse. Like we're rushing through the story, and then so the emotion isn't getting through. Michael Ketchum says there's 2 poems here. Dropped a barber stick with sheep. There's a world ending. I think they do fit. Because I think we get the answer at the end to why he's suspicious of the barber needing the insurance money, because that's what they did back on the 4th of July with the sheep. And so it's interesting, but I think it needs to be explored more on like a more emotional level and by laying out the story more. So I think we just don't have enough substance here. Gray CD2 says, I love the variety of viewpoints being expressed here. This is the magic of poetry. I'm not sure. I think the variety is because there's something missing. I think it's clear to all of us that there's something missing in the poem. And even to Terry, I think, too. I mean, that's why he sent this. He was having trouble with these poems. The question is, what we're all trying to discuss is what it is. Like, what's missing exactly? Because as a poem, it's told in a straightforward way where we know what's going on. And we're not lost in the poem, which we are with so many poems. And yet it's still missing that kind of like oomph, that the kind of heart behind the poem. And it's a really interesting topic. I mean, there's some confession in there too. We burned down our own insurance. We committed insurance fraud and arson, I mean, that's a serious thing to confess to in a poem. And there will be a lot of emotion behind that. I mean, especially as a young boy, as Terry, I think, was given the poem, knowing that and keeping that a secret. There's some shame maybe in that memory. There's a lot of emotion there. And then applying that to the barber is an interesting thing too. And did the barber actually do it? Or am I suspicious just because that happened to me and it reminded me of that thing where I'm harboring some guilt for? I mean, there's a lot that's going on there in that poem. To me, I think it's because the whole story hasn't come out yet. Brian O'Sullivan says title comes from shave, a haircut, 2 bits, I guess, but also possibly 2-bit insurance fraud. Yeah, I was going to say, thanks for reminding me that. Yeah, the title is really interesting because there's 2 bits of story. There's story 1 and story 2. So there's 2, and they're little shortly told bits of story. And then also, 2 bits for a haircut back in the day, and not anymore, which is why I cut my hair myself. But also, like a 2-bit insurance fraud thing too. There's a lot of puns. It's really great. It's kind of like a really Hyben, like we talk about Hyben titles. It's a Hyben inspired kind of title, which is great. It's pulling a lot of weight. I like the title a lot. I just think I think both sides of the story need to be fleshed out. And again, I'd take a look at what David Kirby does with those braids. Barbara Hamby too, his wife, another great poet on the Rattlecast as well. She weaves a lot of things, both of them, because they work together and write together a lot, weave in a similar kind of way. Check out the way they do that, and I think flesh these stories out. Go back and forth between the two. I just want more in this poem, and I think the heart of it, there's just so much complicated beneath it. Brian O'Sullivan says that they definitely burned the pump shed down on purpose. I could also imagine a 4th of July fireworks accident. Well, I think, it says we burned the pump shed down. Grandfather died. And I think the fact that he went to that here implies very strongly that that's what happened here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So anyway, so that's my thoughts. I think this is one to expand. Mostly, I like the storytelling. There are a few lines that I pointed out that don't work as well. I think maybe this is what D. Coleman is referring to here, or maybe to Winston Munn. I'm trying to follow the thread here. But D. Coleman says, I'm thinking that we are tempted to use interesting, unique words, thinking they're better than simple, ordinary words, but that doesn't often work, and the poems suffer for it. I generally agree. I mean, sometimes it's a perfect word, and it really fits, but I think he's referring to this. And I wouldn't describe this as long and hirsute, just because I'm not sure. It's an archaic kind of word. It sort of places you back there, but it might be too far back. It's not a word that I've seen in a poem very often. I'll put it that way. And having to stop and look the word up, which I did, sort of pulls you out of the poem, and it sort of stands out. It's a different kind. There's that phrase inkhorn. I always love that phrase, inkhorn words, which are those sort of like long, unusual words that you'd slip in using your thesaurus. And I'm called inkhorn because it takes up a lot of ink out of your inkhorn. Putting in the longer word when a shorter word would do. And but there's a kind of I think of it more as like poeticizing, but making things sound more poetic by using more obscure words. And I agree that usually that doesn't work. And so that line feels a little off to me, especially as the opening line. There's something about my silver hair is long, and the barbershop is burning that I think works, but I don't think that the hairsuit is necessary. So that's one other thing I'd cut out. But otherwise, as far as the line breaks and the pacing, I think the voice is nice given the structure of the poem. There's a lot of sort of honesty. The descriptions aren't, for the most part, other than that, aren't overly complicated and clearly put, though. My grandfather used to slam our woolly sheep on a low-slung table. I mean, that's a really nice sentence, actually. I mean, there's the hard Anglo-Saxon word slam. And then the low-slung table. It kind of feels like almost they're being slammed in, but it's also told really simply and also very visually. So there's those components are working really well in this poem. I think for the most part that's good. I just want more. Okay, let's take a look at the other poem. I don't want to go on too long. Yeah. And Tom Brown says, how much insurance money would they get from a pump house? Not much. Yeah. So I just want more. Yeah. And I'll read this too. Katie Skirk Galloway says, I think I'm left hungry for deeper perspective of the barber's situation to get to the heart of the real desperation beneath the feigned despair. Yeah. I just like to know more of the story. Okay. Let's move on. This is Pine Cones, and we'll read the note after. I just want to read the poem cold first. Because that's how you read poems in the wild. They come out cold. Even in the summer issues. Okay, Pine Cones. Sorry, 1 second. Still recovering from that cold or whatever. Anyway, Pine Cones. Chamber of infant trees, a cough from limbs litters them across dry needles like pickup sticks interlaced into a brown thatch of receiving. Children, the wisest of our kind, gather them into shirt fronts, fashioned into baskets. They count each treasure as they place it on the porch. The meticulous arrange them, sort by size, smallest to largest, each having distinct personality, each carrying a forest to come. Sleeping pinions are plucked from barky nesting, placed in the palm of the youngest for examination and protection. The children prepare uneasy earth for the planting of the seeds. Placed lovingly, each like a wrapped corpse into the cool soil, where, in the exuberance of time, they will be forgotten until tiny sprigs break free from their burial. That's it. Yeah, so there's a lot of nice descriptions in here. I think a little bit forcing too much in places. Yeah. Another poet says a lot of great images. Ian Lockerbie says the images are strong. Yeah. Okay, so pine cones. And I think, with the title, it kind of already feels like the pine cones are going to be, symbolizing something like and then they end up doing that. So chamber of infant trees, a cough from limbs litters them across dry needles like pickup sticks, interlaced into a brown thatch of receiving. I think my problem, I love the chamber of infant trees is really nice. I like a cough from limbs litters them across dry needles like pickup sticks. Like that's nice. I'm not sure. I guess it goes a little bit off for me here. The like pickup sticks, we're still talking about the pine cones, and it's the needles that are like pickup sticks. So it's like they're landing on pickup sticks, not that they're like pickup sticks on their own. And I think, there's a way that we could just be talking about the needles like pickup sticks. But the structure of the sentence lets it be ambiguous as to if we've shifted off that or not, which is, it's an interesting problem with English. You got to be clear in different ways. And so that makes the image kind of muddled and a little bit possibly inaccurate. So I think maybe we could rephrase that a little bit, but then interlaced into a brown thatch of receiving kind of extends it too far. Maybe we don't need the color. Maybe there's just like a little bit too much detail here, where it's like I'm trying too hard. As I was saying, that Winston Munn says feels forced a time or two. The musicality is easy to tune to like. Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a little bit too much. I'd trim this stanza back a little bit. Speaking of haircuts. Children, wisest of our kind, gather them into shirt fronts, fashioned into baskets. I like that. I think Hemet, maybe Malik, said she liked that phrase too. I like that. They count each treasure as they place it on the porch. Should it be them as they place them on the porch? I think so. Even though it's each treasure, they're placing them all on the porch. Anyway, the meticulous arrange them, sort by size, smallest to largest, each having distinct personality, each carrying a forest to come. This is another one where I feel like this thought could be combined into one and be, I think it's like split into two separate things where it'd be much stronger if it was just one thing, if that makes sense. Smallest to largest, each having the personality of a forest to come, or something like that, where it's just one phrase. But anyway, sleeping pinions are plucked from barky nesting, placed in the palm of the youngest for examination and protection. I think this stanza isn't as interesting as the rest. The children prepare uneasy earth for the planting of the seeds, place lovingly each like a wrapped corpse into cool soil, where in the exuberance of time they will be forgotten until tiny sprigs break free from their burial. Yeah. Desi Cochran says this poem could do well to be more pressed. Shelley K says, could you be more specific about their unique personalities? What makes them different and unique? Show us instead of tell us. Yeah, that's why this stanza isn't, or I guess it's this one. Yeah. Jenny Middleton says, why is the earth uneasy? Oh, Jenny, thanks for coming over here from Facebook, too. It's so hard to remember to look at Facebook. Yeah. Anyway, so to me, I think the description goes on too far a little bit. I think I would trim a few of these lines, cut this stanza, but what's really missing is a turn, or is a sort of a, the what it meant, like what's at stake. I saw somebody earlier, it might have been Winston, say what's at stake in this poem, and I think that's the issue. We sort of we lean toward it with they will be forgotten until tiny twigs break free from their burial. So it feels like this should have emotional weight to it, you know? And I think talking about children, talking about regeneration, talking about death like we did here, it feels like there's something in there about, you know, dying. It was Nina Eviden that said that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nina. There's something about like dying and the next generation being like carrying on for you. There's a lot of emotion, obviously, in that. And it feels like that's like there, but not completely explored. And I think what's sort of missing, if we condensed the poem a little bit, took out some of the excess detail, and then left it and carried on just a little bit. Like when you say this, like what's the next thing that comes to mind? It feels like it doesn't have its ending yet to me. But there is. I think it's the personal. It's how do I feel, I guess. You know, these children doing this, there's sort of an implied what I'm thinking about, but I don't say what I'm thinking about. And I think it's one of those poems where we want to say we're missing you saying what you're thinking about. I think that's it. Yeah. J.D. Middleton says, I think the poem's about growing rather than dying. Well, the two are, I think, both related, but I think that's where the emotion is. And if it's like the world will continue on, the world continues to grow, there's emotion there, you know? Yeah, Jamie Thomas says, I'd like to see a more personal poem from this poet. The descriptions are so good, but there's no weight. Yeah. And so I think it's just, there's something in here, but we got to that point, and instead of elaborating and digging deeper, we ended the poem. And maybe it's that the emotion became a strong emotion that I didn't want to go to. I didn't want to explore it, and that's why the poem stopped. But I think it's a poem that ended too early. And it feels, because we sort of stretched it out longer by extending maybe longer we needed the descriptions, it feels like a poem length, but it didn't quite get to the heart of the matter. It sort of touched the surface of the heart, and then it stopped when that's the surface. And then so think about the other poem too, and how there were two stories. Is there a totally different story you could go to at this point? Is there something? There just seems to be that there's something more, and we've only like touched the surface of it. And so I think my suggestion would be to go deeper, and just try to push the poem forward more. I'm going to see what Terry said about this poem. He said, pine cones comes from watching my grandchildren collect pine cones. They are fascinated with those things. I'm trying to bring the poem around to saying something about a parent's loss of a child. I've been thinking a lot lately of the images of the dead and injured children in the Middle East conflict and the war in Ukraine. The poem may need more stanzas, so you already know, Terry. The poem may need more stanzas, but I'm concerned about making it too long. Well, I guess don't be concerned about making it too long. Trim up what is excess. But then, yeah, I think we have to push farther, explore more of what we're talking about here. Okay. So yeah. So I think, Terry, like you kind of already know. And I wonder, it's been a while. Maybe you already revised this poem anyway. But, yeah. Let me just I'll put it back on screen for a minute. Yeah, the children, think about it through, the loss of children. The children prepare uneasy earth for the planting of seeds, placing lovingly each like a wrapped corpse into cool soil, where in the exuberance of time they'll be forgotten until tiny sprigs break free from their burial. Maybe we should go. As Mary Knight says, not a hint of Ukraine, though. Maybe the thing is we want to go there. Yeah. Hedrick says, maybe talk about how pine cones can go bare from squirrels and others gnawing away all of the seeds. And yet another interesting place to go. I think... if your mind is going there, like just go there and see what happens. I mean, go to the children of Ukraine if you want. I mean, don't shy away. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if you want to strip it back, then later, then do. But see what happens. Play with it, push it forward, and see. It's where your subconscious wants to go that matters. And I think too, I'll just say personally to Terry, because I've been reading his poems for a long time. The main thing, and I think he's gotten a lot better really at this in the last 6 months or so, actually. We have a poem coming up from Terry in the spring issue. And it's because Terry started to, in the last few months, really push poems a little bit farther. I think these are an example of being, 6 or 9 months ago or 8 months ago at this point. These are poems that were, I think we hadn't realized that, I think he was just realizing maybe that he should push his poems a little farther. And I think this, at the time, it needed pushing, and he kind of knew it but hadn't done it yet. I think he's doing it now. So do just keep pushing those poems. Make sure they have some of that turn, some of that break, some of that cut, some of that surprise, going somewhere, starting in a different place than you end, a different time and space, a different like thought pattern, like having the shift there, is something really important. And yeah. Okay. Jamie Thomas says, I'm confused why he wouldn't start in the actual moment of watching his grandchildren and use that as the frame. That's a good suggestion too, actually. If you want to cut it down and go in that new direction, we do have Billy Collins coming up as a guest in the Rattlecast, and the prompt is to use his style of poem, which is to sort of sit down, watch something from your kitchen window, and then daydream about it in a way that's interesting. And that's kind of what Billy always does. And think of it as that frame. Like, read a poem of his, like, a recent one me and Katie like a lot is The Cardinal from his one of his newer books. Check that poem out. Something else. There are a lot of poems, but check out the way that he sort of muses on something that makes him think of something else, and then that's what he's really exploring. Why not just start, I'm watching the grandchildren do this, like be upfront about that, use some of the descriptions that are already there, and then go into that deeper thing you wanted to talk about. Like, just start talking and look at some Billy Collins poems for examples of how to do that structurally, Okay, so anyway, that's our advice. Thanks for sharing these, Billy. Hope it, or not Billy. I was just reading Billy out the corner of my eye, Terry, and and I definitely you're making great progress, Terry. I can say that for sure. Okay, let's move on to another poet. Steve. Let's do Steve Horrell, who is up at the top, and then if we have any time, we'll get to a couple more people at the bottom. But let's see what Steve sent us. Steve is here. So Steve says this. I don't think there's too much, spoilers in this. Difficult to decide what poems to send in for critique. Hafengrans was submitted as a braided poem prompt. I have a question regarding the title of Erosion, A Common Story. Which one is better, or should it remain as both or something else? Would like to make both these better before I send them out. Okay. So pretty general thoughts on this. About relatively short poems. So thanks for being concise, Steve. Of course, Steve's from British Columbia. Hafengrans. And he tells us what that means. I assume yeast braid, which I appreciate. I assume Hafengrans is yeast, right? Oh, no. Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's a yeast wreath, they call it. Braided dough. Okay. Okay. I remember my mother, her swabbish distrust of High German, braid 3 slabs of egg-rich dough like daughters do pigtails or garlic. I lay my head down, a feast of memory. I wake up and hear the wind pushing night through a cemetery of dead leaves. An owl hoot, hoot, hoo, hoo, who cooks for you? A truck Jake breaks down the hill. The silence is damaged, but it's not yet fatal. I return to the dream I was hoping to avoid. Do we really drown, or is this just the way among the rooms that have no way out, but somehow there is always the running and the falling? Then I remember Bill Walls, his 52 Plymouth strewn with wrinkled uniforms, marine boots and hat on the back seat, beer bottles all over the floor. 4 of us crashing there for the night. His apartment on wheels, he said, his head rolled back. He never made it back from Vietnam. In my own way, I need the dough, feel my mother's strength, war-torn as well. But for me in Canada, it's not so hard. I speak at least one of the languages. No one is shooting at me. I watch a hawk circle the chickens. The rooster herds the layers in. Sometimes I sit on your bench by the solemn river. know that I will not grow old with you. Well, I think that's a very nice poem. Heffengrons. I think I like the concept of using a braid and a braid. I don't know if that's really necessary. I think I would cut the yeast braid part of it and let us look up the word Heffengrons if we don't know it, which maybe everybody does. You never know. But I would drop the yeast braid. There are a few times where the lack of punctuation almost entirely works. There are a few lines where I tripped over because of the lack of punctuation. So I remember my mother, her Swabish distrust of High German, braid 3 slabs of egg-rich dough. So those first lines, it makes sense and it works perfectly well grammatically if there is commas separating this, making this a, what do you call it, a subordinate clause or a parenthetical aside. But without that, I do trip up over that. And I think the structure would work fine if we were using regular punctuation, but because we're not, I trip up over that phrase. I remember my mother... So I would probably, just to make it clear, just break up that into different sentences. So I could say, I remember my mother's Swabish distrust of High German. She would braid 3 strabs of egg-rich dough like daughters do pigtails or ride garlic. And I think that'd be perfect. So it's just when you don't use punctuation, you gain this sort of sense of freedom and like I'm not trying. And it's just this like the list. There's sort of a listing nature to it too that works. But you just have to, there's some limitations. And the limitations are sometimes you introduce ambiguity that makes it difficult to read. So you got to be aware of that. And just making that little shift fixes that. Anyway, I lay my head down, a feast of memory. I wake up and hear the wind pushing night through a cemetery of dead leaves. I think that's nice. An owl, hoot, hoot, who cooks for you? I think that's a little bit too much. I would cut the hoot hoot maybe. An owl who cooks for you. Maybe I would do that. A truck Jake breaks down the hill. I've never heard the phrase Jake breaks, but you know exactly what it means, which is interesting. The silence is damaged, but it's not yet fatal. And that fatal, foretells something we're going to be talking about later. So that works well, I think. I return to the dream I was hoping to avoid. I think this is nice too. I like the transition here. I return to the dream. There's something, I don't know, like intimate and honest about it, but also a little like winking and sly at the same time. And then also saying it was the dream I was hoping to avoid. It's a confession kind of thing. I think that works really too in getting us more intimate with the reader. So that's really nice too. Do we really drown, or is this just the way among the rooms that have no way out, but somehow there's always the running and the falling? I like the abstraction of that too. Like we're not lost. We know we're in a dream and we go into a sort of abstract place. So that's a really nice, it works well too. Then I remember Bill Walls, his 52 Plymouth strewn with wrinkled uniforms, marine boots and hat on the back seat, beer bottles all over the floor. So nice details. So we get a sense of him. I don't know if, I probably cut the then. It's a small thing, but I would just lay it out there and just go right to I remember Bill Walls. Because we're already, I guess what it is we're already inside of this narrative where we're going back and forth between your dream that you're telling us about. And I think it's a quicker, faster shift if we cut the then. These are really small things to change though. Beer bottles all over the floor. It's a nice detail. 4, I would spell out the 4 because it's a little awkward to have the letter number written out. 4 of us crashing there for the night. His apartment on wheels, he said. Here, I would either cut the quotes from single to double. I would either cut them. Sorry, I would cut the quotes, or I would make them actual double quotes. Single quotes shouldn't really be used. There's not, and it makes it feel like sort of amateur-y. You can also italicize that segment too, but really avoid single quoting things because it does introduce. Wheels looks like a possessive plural, for example. It adds that factor, and there's actually no grammatical place where you would use those except for inside of other quotes, but of course we're not inside other quotes. So make it double or don't use them at all. Is his head rolled back? And then another small thing, really a small thing is on a really good poem. His head rolled back, and then he never made it back. That's a repetition that doesn't add anything energy-wise by repeating, and so it's a detracting kind of repetition. There's a way you could redo it where you're like emphasizing the back where it would work, but it's really not that kind of poem. So I would not do that. I would not repeat the word back here. His head rolled and then describe a little bit instead of saying back. He never made it back from Vietnam. I guess the reason is because it focuses the attention on this and like the wordplay of it. And we really want the heart of it. The emotion is in not making it back, not making it from Vietnam, and the back is just not where the emotion lives. So it's detracting from that, I guess. In my own way, I like to shift back to the doe. In my own way, I need the doe, feel my mother's strength, war-torn as well. But for me in Canada, it's not so hard. I speak at least one of the languages. No one is shooting at me. I watch a hawk circle the chickens. So I like the reverie, the way where it feels like authentic daydreaming about important things, and there's a connection and intimacy to that. I watch a hawk circle the chickens. The rooster herds the layers in. Sometimes I sit on your beach by the solemn river. Know that I will not grow old with you. And I think that's nice too. So I think it's just a good poem with some small edits, really. I haven't looked at what everyone else is saying. Yeah. Let me see what everybody else is saying here. Yeah, so people are agreeing with like cut the word back. Let me see. Yeah, Sharon Fronte is really liking this poem. Winston Munn says, most temporal words can be eliminated. That's interesting. Dick Westheimer said, so only barred owls hoot like that. It's a very specific reference, but it stands alone in its specificity in that section. Yeah, I might, reading the poem again, and I hadn't thought really as much about this when I read it. It is too specific. I agree with Dick. And it's just a little bit different from the rest of the poem. What is really lost if we just say an owl hoots, a truck jack breaks down the hill? I think it's a little too specific and a little bit distracting and just unnecessary. It calls more attention to itself than it really needs. Let's see. And Patty Arbor says, for me, the power of the poem is from Bill Walls. Yeah, definitely agree with that. Yeah. So I'm just reading, seeing if anybody has any... Yeah. One thing, the phrase, D. Coleman says this, the phrase, her swabbish distrust of High German is interesting, but is it necessary to this poem? And that's a good point. Yeah. I should have thought of that myself, but it is an interesting detail. And so my impulse is to keep it because it's interesting. I liked hearing about the mother distrusting High German and what swabbish is. I don't really know, but it's interesting. But the mother's not really a central figure in that way, in like a distinct person. And I don't know if it's necessary. I remember my mother braiding 3 slabs of egg-rich dough like daughters do pigtails or garlic. I think that's like, what do you need more than that? Yeah, so let's cut this line too. But otherwise, I really like this poem. I think, just small edits. I didn't really see anybody. Oh, Jamie Thomas says like the swabbish part because the title is in German. That's interesting. Yeah. Oh, Brian O'Sullivan says, I kind of thought the Who Cooks For You was a reference back to the kneading of the dough at the beginning. Yeah, it definitely is, I guess, but it seems it's like forced for that reason, I guess, Like, I don't know. I mean, what I said originally was it stands out so much, it's given 2 full lines. So I suggested saying just cutting the hoot hoot, and so it's just who cooks for you. But I don't know. I could go either way on that. Okay. Tamarel says the swabbish sets up the war reference. Does it? because they're coming back from Vietnam. I don't know what. It's a different war that High German would be. Is there something about Swabish that is specifically war oriented? I don't know. Maybe there's something that I don't quite get, but to me, I just think it's not really necessary. But I like the poem, so I'd cut it. Just trim back those little things. There are a lot of little things, but nothing major. I think it's really nicely told. I should say we're almost, we got some time left, but if you haven't clicked the like button yet, please do. We got 60 people watching live and not that many likes, so make sure you click like so other people see this later. Yeah. Okay, well, let's see what the other poem is. But yeah, good work, Steve. I think this is probably, Steve, the best poem I've read of yours. It's really nice that it's a newer poem because it's nice. It's nice like Terry. It's nice to see people growing and getting better as time goes on, and it definitely happens. We and Katie talk about it all the time, but the poets who are here are the best poets that are submitting poems to us. We really regular submissions, and it's like, oh God, why can't we have more people from from the Rattlecast sharing poems? Anyway, let's continue with the other poem. And this, remember, he had Steve was asking about the title here. He's like, should it be one or the other, or should it be both? So keep that in mind as we read. I got to cough again. Hang on one second. Okay. Erosion, a common story. The joy of mornings together, familiarity of flesh. Hey, one second. Let me tell you one thing, by the way. When you're submitting poems, and this is just a critique of the week submission. Doesn't matter at all, of course, but try to do it with a consistent font. There's a lot of things, you know how they say, like, I don't know, like so much of communication is body language or whatever. And there is a lot of stuff that goes on beneath the surface of even your awareness. And one of the things we talk about plating poems and the professional, if you feel like the poem is like, the submission is carefully crafted and professionally done, you're more likely to give it some slack and like connect to it, even if you're not aware of it at all. Just having that sort of formal authority that I know what I'm doing is one of those subtle things that works. So if you're submitting poems, make sure that the font size is consistent with each poem, and that how you do titles is the same, and that the font type is the same throughout the whole submission. And that makes it feel, as you're reading through a packet of submissions, like the poet just is on top of things. And that confidence leads you to feel like the voice is more confident and let yourself go with the poem more. Even if it's something that you're not aware of at all as a reader, it just helps. And so, I noticed right away that the font is much larger, and we didn't bold, whereas last time we bold. And so have a consistent style guide for yourself when you're writing in your manuscripts and putting your poems together. And that makes you look more, it just makes you have more confidence in reading. Anyway, here we go. Let's see. Hedrick says, don't let a stanza meant to be together get broken by a page break. Yeah, all sorts of things like that. Mm-hmm. And really what matters is just the consistency. Whatever style you want to use, if it's the confidence of you picking a style and sticking with it that makes you feel more professional. Okay. Erosion / a common story. The joy of mornings together, familiarity of flesh, her hair falling over his chest. The times they drove to the coast, clutching the waves, binding together the salt lick of bodies, laughing and dreaming of always. But somehow the daily erosion set in, perhaps her laughs too loud, abrasive even. Her teeth click when she chews. He's grumpy, farts too much, calls her down in public. He finds solace in others, maybe her best friend. She finds less and less. Love erodes into a delta of grief, spreading out from her feet. But every morning she tries to extract a shard of joy from the return of the sun, from birdsong, a new bird at the feeder. She tries and tries. Well, that's interesting. There's a sense of rhythm to the poem, but I was having a little bit of trouble following it. And it is difficult for me because I'm watching things while reading and trying to make sure everything's working. But I had a little bit of trouble like picking up the story. It felt a little ungrounded. And so I was always, there's sort of a way you're like, I don't know how much this is me or this is a universal experience, but very often it takes like a second for me if somebody's like, hey, Tim, blah, blah, blah. There's like a second where I'm like, didn't hear the beginning because I was like only shifting my awareness. And then for whatever else they have to say, I'm like catching up and trying to like figure out what was said. And so you can never really grasp. And that's kind of what it feels like with poems that don't have grounding. It's like you're always just trying to catch up with what's going on and you don't really connect with it. And that's how I felt reading this. So let me try to read it again and sort of get a sense of our bearings. I don't quite have that. Erosion, a common story. The joy of mornings together, familiarity of flesh, her hair falling over his chest. So I guess, with her hair falling over his chest, like who's speaking makes me wonder, are we like an omniscient God? And I think that's one of the things that makes it feel like it's a little disconnected and distant. And I'm not quite sure who's who or what, where we are, I guess, in this perspective. Also, familiarity of flesh feels like too forced and kind of, I don't know. It's not a great phrase. It's one of those abstractions that feels like it should be meaningful, but doesn't actually pull anything up. So, and like what's missing if we just say the joy of mornings together, her hair falling over his chest? Did we gain anything by saying familiarity of flesh? I don't think so. So just cut that. But I'm not sure where we are in this picture. The times they drove the coast, clutching the waves, binding together the salt lick of bodies, laughing and dreaming of always. What are the times? We go the joys, then we go the times. It's like a incomplete sentence, I guess. So it wasn't just me, with this. It's sort of hard to get a sense of your ground here. The times they drove to the coast, clutching the waves, binding together the salt lick of bodies, laughing and dreaming of always. It's sort of a stereotypical type imagery too. It just doesn't have a lot here. Sidney Guntherman says, I want to know the point of the story. Yes, these things happen, but why do we care? Yeah, exactly. I mean, Kimberly Gibson already agreed with that. Yeah. Morgan Feeney says more concrete images, joy, familiarity, they're so abstract. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of abstraction, just not a lot to actually connect with. But somehow the daily erosion set in, perhaps her laugh's too loud, abrasive even, her teeth click when she chews, he's grumpy, farts too much, calls her down in public. He finds solace in others, maybe her best friend, she finds less and less. Love erodes into a delta of grief, spreading out from her feet. But every morning she tries to extract a shard of joy from the return of the sun, from bird song, a new bird at the feeder. She tries and tries. So I actually like the ending. I think someone said they didn't like it. The ending is sort of the only thing I like about the poem. I think it's sort of generalizing and abstracting so much that there's just not a lot of like meat on the bones. There's not a lot to connect with. And it is, I think maybe it gets into the problem of trying to write a common story. Like, not that you can't have a title that's that, but trying to write this sort of commonality ends up with something that's really bland and doesn't have a lot to connect with. And so I think, be specific about this. You can say his and her. I mean, I think one of the most emotionally powerful books, it's really devastating, is The Road, which is like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi, I guess, maybe not sci-fi, what do you call it, novel. It's just man and boy, like you can have that kind of abstraction and still have a lot of emotion to it. But you still have to have the specificity of connecting to the characters. And so if you want to say his and her and keeping it like that, keeping that abstract, that's fine. As long as we get an actual sense of who they are as people without names or without a sense, without the I in there. You know what I mean? Okay. Yeah. And as Winston Munn says, I don't feel as though the poet ever surprised him or herself with where this went. Yeah, exactly, too. So, so this one, I mean, maybe this is the start of the poem. Maybe there's a poem here that we sort of, I had an idea to write about something. I sort of wrote what I thought about ahead of time. It sort of got a premeditated vagueness to it. Then we slipped into something interesting. I mean, what if you had a poem called A Common Story, let's say, and then we started out, every morning she tries to extract a shard of joy from the return of the sun, from bird song, a new bird at the feeder. She tries and tries, but, and then, go into that. She's there trying to extract joy from the return of the sun. What happens next? What emotion? What goes in the way? Like dig into that farther. And maybe that's just the start of a poem right here. But the rest, there's no meat to it. Okay. Let's see. Well, we'll do one more really quickly. Oops. Sorry, didn't want to give that view. We're going to go back to older poems. We'll find someone who has like a short one or two. So bear with me for 1 second because we have a few minutes left. Okay. Let's do these two. This is Sarah Feminella from California, Los Angeles. And Sarah has no general questions or anything. So let's take a look at the poems. We'll try to be a little quicker too, but I want to make sure we get to a little bit more than just two poets. Every new touch carries with it a history of not touching. So I like the title, first of all. After we drove the doctors from their offices, yanked stethoscopes from their necks, and ripped the test results from their hands, after we blamed the wind or the history of the wind or whatever it was that blew the lids right off our boxes and scattered our records beyond what divination could make of them, after the tarot taught us to love our bad luck as it was written, whether we pulled the hanged man or the high priestess, after we began all our songs with C major, each gaping black piano like a corpse mouth choiring the sorrow we redacted from our calendars, it's not that we learned to be sorry, but that we learned evasion, eyes down, hands in pockets, after we censored all our love poems, since one suffering only leads to another, so there's no use making beauty of need. After all we wanted was to touch each other, after all that time apart, we put our bodies in anyone's hands, after the astrologers charted our rising sun signs and found no path for us to manifest, after the offerings, after the bedding down, the bedlam, the bleach, the borrowed songs, the clapping, the prayers, the protest, all we were looking for was one clear line to show us where we could begin again. After we had the cartographers redraw our topography to make space for the cadavers, to create new hills and valleys with clear, brightly marked roads. After, with our maps of wars and plagues, with our maps of canticles and cages of fools laid out before us, we could finally ignore everything the signs had been telling us. After we learned to live with it, after we became someone else's history, after we became someone else's lesson learned. Well, there's a great rhythm. This is really nice. Good music and rhythm too, says Elizabeth Brown. Katie Spriggs Galloway is loving this. And Elizabeth Brown, this feels like it could be shortened, and that's my main thing. I think it goes on a little bit too far. But there's great lines. Ryan McCarty points out the cartographers redrew our topographies. That's great. Jamie Thomas says this is really terrific, but it's very general. And I think, let me see. Morgan Feeney says the last line feels a bit cliche, though. And Winston Munn says, first half had me on my toes, last half my mind drifted. It's just a little too long. There's some disagreement about the last line. So Cynthia Gutherman says the last line is nice. Someone else said it was a little cliche. There's an interesting line between cliche and great, which is like some things are so, like, they feel cliche because they're so, like, simple and true. And then Katie Scruggs Galloway says, about the second half, but the momentum isn't matched with meaning and depth. Yeah, and Jamie Thomas says, who is who here? Again, great rhythm and interesting turns of phrase, but what is it really saying? Someone said earlier, what's at stake? Yeah, so this is really, I think it's a... and Gibson says, Gibson Tran says, tough to exit this poem. Should it go out with a bang or a whimper? Yeah, let's take a look. I think there's some stuff we're going to read a little more slowly and just think about how to end it, because I think that's the thing. As I'm reading the poem, I'm enjoying it. I'm really gripped by the emotion, by the momentum, the rhythm, the music, the detail. All those things are really drawing me in. I start to think maybe about halfway through, like, how's this going to end? Like, what? How? Like, if this is a good poem, it's got me hooked. Is it going to like reel me in all the way? And then it goes on a little bit too far. I get that sense, and then the ending, like, what is the ending? Like, is this the right ending or not? If we shorten it, would the ending work? So that's we're going to read through and think about that. Every new touch carries with it a history of not touching. That's a really interesting concept. I like that. Sorry, I should have muted. After we drove the doctors from their offices, yanked stethoscopes from their necks, and ripped the test results from their hands. So I'm not sure what we're referring to. And this is one of those... Sorry. This is one of those cases where it's a dangerous thing, because if you have enough detail and enough music, you can get away with being a little lost. And I think in this one, lost works, not knowing who the we is and having this sort of disassociated feel with it. But it's like one of those, like, don't try this at home, folks. It usually doesn't work when you do it. But I think there's enough detail and energy in this that it does. So I actually like that we don't know exactly what's going on, because we're so grounded in everything else concrete that's swirling around us. And so I think that I'm happy with that. After we blame the wind or the history of the wind or whatever it was that blew the lids right off our boxes and scattered our records beyond what divination could make of them, the really nice thing this does too is it has an image and you think it's like good enough, and then it pushes past and like keeps it going in a way that is just as interesting, but then it kind of compounds. It did be good. I always think about, I said this before, but what Elvin Lau, the slam poet, told me once is that the way you win a slam is to have like the most sort of content per second. Like it's like a density, and having the most like emotional content and image too, and all that stuff just condensed. And this has a lot of that, and I think that makes it really work. It's a good example of that. It would make a good slam poem too, because it's got energy and it's got that density. Our boxes scattered our records beyond what divination could make of them. After the tarot taught us to love our bad luck as it was written, whether we pulled the hangman or the high priestess. See, that's one of those things. We could have just ended bad luck as it was written, but then we go to the hangman and the high priestess. That's cool. After we began all our songs with C major, each gaping black piano like a corpse mouth choiring the sorrow we redacted from our calendars. It's not that we learned to be sorry, but that we learned evasion, eyes down, hands in pockets. After we censored all our love poems, since one suffering only leads to another, so there's no use making beauty of need. After all we wanted was to touch each other, after all that time apart, we put our bodies in anyone's hands. After the astrologers charted our rising sun signs and found no path for us to manifest, that's a little bit, I think pulling the tarot, this is where I'd start to cut stuff. It starts to feel a little redundant. This was so close to the tarot and didn't have the same push it deeper energy and creativity as the earlier stuff. So there's a first cut, I'd say. After the offerings, after the bedding down, the bedlam, I think the poet, recognized that maybe, that she was losing it, and then went to a more concise, tight list, which picked the energy back up. So I think that was like noticing, maybe subconsciously, that we'd lost the thread a little bit. So just cut that. After the offerings, after the bedding down, the bedlam, great alliteration here, the bedlam, the bleach, the borrowed songs, the clapping, the prayers, the protests, all we were looking for was one clear line to show us where we could begin again. And so to me, I guess, to talk about what the poem feels like it's about, it feels about just the last sort of the collective last decade, with the COVID, with the insanity of like electing Donald Trump as the president, just the feel of like are we living in a real world? I mean, there's just this weirdness to everything. And after all that happening collectively and feeling like our collective relationship is like a single relationship, I mean, there's something to it, like the individual becoming collective here and vice versa. Anyway, all we were looking for was one clear line to show us where we could begin again. After we had the cartographers redraw our topography to make space for the cadavers, to create new hills and valleys with clear, brightly marked roads. After, with our maps of wars and plagues, with our map of canticles and cages of fools laid out before us, we could finally ignore everything the signs had been telling us. After we learned to live with it, after we became someone else's history, after we became someone else's lesson learned. Yeah. I'm just not sure. I don't think the ending just lives up to the rest of the poem. And it's a hard poem to wrap up. I mean, in all fairness. I mean, could we cut the last 3 lines? Is it a satisfying ending to go after, with our maps of wars and plagues, with our maps of canticles and cages of fools laid out before us, we could finally ignore everything the signs had been telling us? No, I think there's a sense that we need something more. What if we cut the last 2 lines and just said after we learned to live with it and left it at that? Kimberly Gibson Tran suggests could end on one clear line to show us where. Sorry, I lost that. I lost her comment, but anyway, one clear line. Where was that? Because I saw it and saw the same thing too, or thought the same thing. Where was that? Anyway, yeah, that's a possibility. I think though. I don't know. I think we want it sort of. It needs it's like an if then where it needs the then, after then this or something. And I think even though it says after and it continues that structure, it's still doing that, but it's just not quite. I don't know. It's not quite satisfying. I think it's just missing an ending, and I'm not sure. It's one of those things you just got to play with until it gets to the right ending, I think. Otherwise, it's a really great poem. Yeah, one clear line to show us where to begin again. Where was that? It's hard to sort of scroll and see it. Was it way up here? Oh, fine. One. Oh, here it is. Okay. One clear line. So all we were looking for was one clear line to show us where we could begin again. I think maybe then you need another repetition, though. You need another line if you could end there, I think. One. But you need, so all we were looking for was one clear line to show us where we could begin again. One clear line, something. I think maybe that could work. But just rhythmically, you need something more. Yeah. Sean Evaningo Center says maybe just we learn to live. And that's I guess that's maybe the problem, is we're saying that kind of thing. And you have to find a way to say it that's interesting still, I mean, I don't really know. I think it's just play and maybe my advice always is to write out the poem, say it out loud, and then just say what spontaneously comes out when you get to the place where you're not quite finished. And maybe that'll work. I mean, this is a very skilled poet, though. Just reworking it, I think maybe it'll make it work better. Let's do the other poem really quickly just so we get to it. It's pretty short. Sorry. Patriarchy. Again, we're looking at 2 poems by, hang on, 2 poems by Sarah Feminella from Los Angeles. This is Patriarchy. It's a short one. We'll wrap it up quick. Patriarchy. Before you were born, there were no more women left for me to become, so I copied ones already taken. Until your tiny, plundering mouth transformed me into the woman offering her breast to sate your hunger. How quickly your childhood slips past us. We don't know how to turn you from a boy to a man. You keep pushing your boyhood into the blade. This is all we cannot keep you from and from you. How sharp and sharper and sharper. So again, this is interesting. To me, the ending is just not quite right. Yeah. Let me read it again. Before you were born, there were no more women left for me to become, so I copied ones already taken, until your tiny, plundering mouth transformed me into the woman offering her breast to sate your hunger. That's interesting. How quickly your childhood slips past us. That's interesting, too. I don't know how to turn you from a boy to a man. Interesting, too. You keep pushing your boyhood into the blade. I think that's a great line. It's very memorable. It is all we cannot keep you from and from you. How sharp and sharper and sharper. Jamie Thomas says, it's good writing, some of it great, but it feels so distant. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, I like tiny plundering mouth. Shelley K says, what does it have to do with patriarchy? And yeah, I mean, that is the topic of trying to, make boys into men without upholding the patriarchy, but it's important to make men too, so it's interesting. It's one of those poems where, you got to live up. It's such a great line. You got to live the poem up to this line so it can be out there. I think it's great. To me, I think it just works. It's again, the title. Lisa Seidenberg says, like a lot, would like it to push farther. Morgan Feeney says, from and from you is confusing to me. It is. It's like technically it makes sense, but it's a little knot there. It is all we cannot keep you. It's a negative too. It's like a double negative. It's all we cannot keep you from and from you. It's a little too clever maybe. And maybe that's what throws off the poem so it doesn't get to the ending. I feel like it's similar to the last poem. Like there's something more that wants to be said that's not quite said. And I think maybe just saying that concept more clearly, and then the last line similar, I think it'll resolve itself. But it feels like the cleverness of this is sort of throwing it out of the voice that was generating the good poetry here. It's just one too clever, and then we lost the thread. So again, I think the same advice as the last poem. Just rework the ending, and then I think it'll be really good. And maybe push deeper into what we mean by that, or maybe just explain that a little more clearly so don't trip over it. Kimberly Gibson says the speaker still has bitterness to express, I think, more to push through. Yeah, I think we could push farther too. What does the blade do, says Winston Munn. Yeah, there's just more we could go here. Yeah. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up the show for today. Thanks, everybody, for sharing some really wonderful poems this week. 3 poets and 3, a good number of good poems, too. So thanks for sharing those, for being a part of the Rattlecast, or the Critique of the Week. Now, that's going to wrap it up again. Of course, please do hit the like button. If you check out that Poetry Space episode where we were talking about self-publishing our own chapbook. Do I have it here? Did Katie take it with me? Yeah, she didn't have it with me. But yeah, we're talking about putting together our new chapbook, Did You See the Moon, Honey? That's on the Poetry Space, talking about just what chapbooks are and why self-publishing is worthwhile. So check that out anywhere you can find your podcasts. Now, coming up on the Rattlecast, as we already mentioned in this episode, next week's guest is going to be Billy Collins. His new book, Dog Show, is going to be one of the most popular books. It's on Oprah's favorite things list, which poetry books, I don't know if a poetry book has ever been on that list before. It's selling out, and then they're reprinting more. It's already in extra printings, I think. A wonderful short book of poems, Billy Collins' dog poems, plus some wonderful watercolor paintings too. So it's sort of like a mini coffee table book at the same time. Anyway, that book is out. Billy Collins will be on talking about that, talking about poetry in general. That's this Monday, December 8th. And also, I should say the prompt for this week is going to be the following. If I can pull it up. Hang on. I'm getting there. The prompt for this week is to write a poem that begins at the kitchen table and interrupts itself. So I wonder what poet inspired that one. Anyway, that's your prompt for this week. Write a poem that begins at the kitchen table and interrupts itself. Your guest, Billy Collins. Rattlecast number 321, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on Monday, December 8th. Hope to see you there. Hope to see you. Have a great weekend in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.